Okay, 1951, Japanese Communist Party platform. Everyone's heard of this, of course. I don't need to explain anything. So let's start with the Japanese sentences for my presentation. So for the first sentence, Monogatari wa 1951 nen ni hajimarimashita. So the story started in 1951. Next sentence, Moskwa wa okorimashita. Moscow was angry. And Kyosan Shugisha wa ageshi bodo o hajime mashita. The communists began a violent uprising. Bodo wa fusei kyo deshite. The uprising was a failure. Kyosan Shugisha wa Borokyu o mikagiri mashita. The communists then renounced violence. So yeah, this is a short summary of this longer tale I'm going to tell. So, starting scene World War I, Japan lost in World War II. This is the height of communist prestige across the world. Later events that would break up the communist world, they haven't happened yet. So they were pretty united. They had a reputation of being the victors over Nazism. So, setting this image is the Soviet flag being raised over Berlin and ending with, it's a very, very propagandistic photo. Setting scene number 2. Japan at this time I'm talking about was under United States occupation. So they had some democratic institutions. They had elections, but any actual decision making could be overruled by the U.S. and de facto. This time period was the beginning of the Cold War, so an ideological struggle between communism and capitalism, or basically the USSR and the US. This picture is MacArthur and Hirohito, the Japanese emperor, where it's basically saying, look at this guy, look at this American, look how much taller he is than your god emperor. It was a very propagandistic photo they spread around a lot. So, it was 1950. Communism is bad, so they do a crackdown on it. At the behest of the U.S. and many Japanese politicians, some of whom were affiliated with the previous Imperial Japanese government. And so then you have this organization, the student organization, Zengaku Ren, which is the All Japan Federation of Student Self-Government Associations. These guys were very leftist, very communist affiliated. This is a picture of them protesting their communist accused professors getting fired for their political leanings. Then there were these were events that were happening. Then the Japanese Communist Party received orders from above. Just previously, Mao had taken over all of China using these guerrilla tactics of going into rural villages and having the rural folk support you as you wage guerrilla warfare. And Moscow told the Japanese Communist Party to begin similar operations for a communist takeover. So they started a few different branches of their organization. The first two don't really matter. There's nothing online about them. The last one is the only one that actually kind of matters. The Mountain Village Operation Unit. They would form bases in rural Japan to later expand from. So they go into Japanese villages and basically say, support us in the proletarian revolution against the imperialist Americans. And this is bad. This is an awful idea. It didn't work. So the Chinese Model Revolution did not work. The locals did not care for any communist stuff. The war had already ravaged them, literally 6 years earlier, 5 years earlier. They were not willing to cooperate, and they did not want to start another war. And there weren't that many communists in Japan compared to China. Had a much larger communist scene that helped. So here's a member of one of those organizations I mentioned before getting arrested. So they continued this god-awful idea for 5 years. I mean, it amped down after the first year or two, but they continued their basically terrorist campaign. They used Molotovs to burn down police boxes. They used bombs to blow up trains. I'm sure you can throw in a few attempted assassinations in there. Suffice to say, the Japanese people did not like this. Eventually, they realized that this was after like 5 years of this god-awful plan being enacted. They realized this is a god-awful plan as it is, and they changed course. There was an internal power struggle where the more pacifistic faction of the JCP gained power. This is Takuta's faction. Takuta is this guy. He died at 53, but his faction would go on to be the one that'd be dominant. Basically, a way more pacifistic and peaceful revolution, sort of part of the idea of communism, which was pretty revolutionary for the time, kinda. And yeah, the fact that their violence was a failure it convinced one of the parties that it wasn't the way forward. That's the end. Woo. That's the end of the story. The communists are not very popular in Japan.